like glam, go shining bright, colors dance in the night, in the light. You don't owe them a thing, it's not up for debate.
Is that right?
Hey guys, it's been a long time. Good to see you all. Let me just make sure I can hear me. I have a new camera. Yep. I have a new camera. I have new headphones. I'm plugged into the landline, the Ethernet cable, so I should have really good, stable internet and resolution. So I just thought that maybe we could catch up a little, and then I found a video that I think will be very good for us to watch. It's another one that Sarah D. Irish sent to me, so thank you, Sarah. As you can see, my setup is a little different. I made this, she's a, what did I call it? The clam macabre. Everything is like ghosts or skeletons. That's just how it is. Okay, let me see here. What kind of layout should we do tonight? Well, that didn't change anything. Oh, there I go. Okay. All right, let me share it. So I am building a new PC and I have 2 monitors, so I won't have to do the sharing thing with the StreamYard anymore. Yes. All right. Here it is. So this is the International Symposium on Human Identification. And this, I think it happens like once a year. And for some reason, I feel like it's in Canada, but I think I'm wrong about that. So this is so cool. So they have like these forensic events, you know, I don't know if it's annually or whatever. And then they'll do interviews with some of the like forensic scientists that are there. And a lot of these forensic scientists, they are giving presentations on the newest and latest things in forensic science. And I have showed one of these little clips before. I think she was a grad student and she was finishing up her degree and she had made this study, I guess, so that she could study the transfer of DNA, and she had this whole thing. I forget what her name was. Anyway, let's get this started. They do talk about Brian Koberger's case. They're very nice about the way that they say it. So let's see. Let me start it. Oh, yep, I got more than one video. Here we go. Hopefully you can hear it.
Ray, Ashley, thank you so much for joining us here at eSheath, our 35th anniversary. We're really honored that you were here to do a presentation for us and are taking time out for this video. Before we get into Touch DNA, what you spoke about, maybe you could each give us a brief introduction to, talk about your professional background and what brought you here.
Okay. My name is Ashley Hall. Currently, I am the director of the Forensic Science Graduate Program at UC Davis. I came here after grad school. I went into the defense industry for about 5 years, became a bit disenchanted, moved into academia. I've come through 2 Big Ten Tier 1 research universities, Nebraska and Illinois, until I landed at UC Davis. Now, my research focuses on touch DNA and how we can use it to inform activity level propositions.
Excellent. Ray?
Hey, so my name is Ray Wickenheiser. I am a recovering, recently retired forensic scientist. So once a forensic scientist, always a forensic scientist. So I started right out of university, went back to school a couple of times, moved from lab to lab, but was originally a trace evidence scientist in the hair and fiber section. And then when DNA came along, just got really fortunate with stumbling onto that we could get profiles from DNA that was transferred by hand contact or by people touching things, as opposed to blood, semen, saliva, that kind of thing. So really, for me, it was being able to apply the trace evidence principles to DNA. And it has just become really topical recently that, it's not just now how the DNA, like whose is the DNA, it's how did it get there that is becoming more and more important. So I think the timing is great, but I've been now, and I shudder to say it's been over 40 years I've been doing this, but to be able to apply those same principles, I find is very exciting.
I think it's very exciting, and what you're both doing, Touch DNA, is extremely hot. I mean, everybody wants to know more about it, not just in the community, but in the media as well. So Ashley, maybe you can tell us a little bit about activity level propositions and how important they are when you're thinking about Touch DNA evidence.
Well, technology now is so sensitive that many times you can't reasonably dispute whose DNA it is. So the real question becomes, how did it get there? A simple example I like to use is this. So say your DNA was found on the knife handle of a knife at a death scene, right? So the prosecution is going to say, she was there, she did it, see, here's her DNA. Your defense lawyer is going to say, no, she had lunch with the person who did it. They shook hands, and that person transferred her DNA to the knife. So your DNA is there. There's no question about it.
So she's going to give an example of a knife scene. I think that's kind of fitting considering the Brian Koberger case. And they will get into that. Yeah, they're nice about it. I think they're just a little too polite about it, but still, you can see that there's some in the scientific community that are like uncomfortable with what Riley Nolan is doing. So this is so worth it. This is a really great video to watch. All right, let's go back.
What we need to figure out is how it got there.
So that's fascinating. I mean, that opens up so many possibilities on both sides. Ray, your research addresses the difference between primary and secondary DNA transfer. So let's talk about that and how significant that distinction is in the real world when you have a case.
It is very significant. So clearly, when you have direct contact, that would be in using Ashley's example. We have a homicide, we have a weapon there, and we know it was DNA, it is. And now the idea of how it's got there. So clearly, in the case of you found DNA on a knife handle and it matches a suspect, one side is going to say, well, it was through direct contact. That's how it got there. But clearly DNA transfers because it transferred from a hand to a knife. Well, could it transfer to another substrate? And that's how it then transferred over to the knife. So what we need is data. We're scientists. Can we generate some data to help inform? Now, we also have some common sense to go, well, every time we transfer something, you get a little less transfer. So the direct is
still on mute. I got to remember that. So I just want to mention that he's saying here, to use a little common sense. And right now, the common sense is still like that CSI movie magic, like, oh, somebody touched something, so that means they were there, and the paradigm shift of how we're going to think about DNA in the future because of these global standardizations that are going to roll through sometime, I don't know when, but there's going to be implemented a new kind of common sense, because right now, for the public, it's not so common knowledge. So that it's fascinating that common knowledge is going to change. Like when does common knowledge change? It's common knowledge. Anyway, So he's going to talk about common knowledge, but it just struck me because what we think of common sense in DNA isn't anymore because of everything that we've learned in the past 3 years. So I just thought that was cool. All right, here we go.
Very likely going to be the better explanation, maybe intuitively. But not only do we have common sense and intuition, we have the ability to apply data, so you can really apply both. And also part of it is we have so many different types of crime scenes, and every crime scene is unique. So you have to be able to apply the judgment, but it always is better informed with better data. So we want to do both. Use some common sense and our experience, knowledge, education, but also supplement that with really good scientific, rigorous data.
Absolutely. And that must be tough as this emerges, you're documenting where that judgment comes in and then where it moves to the data.
Exactly. Well, for the scientists, it also helps them have confidence when you have data that backs up, well, I think this is the way it should be, and that's maybe my opinion. Oh my goodness, my opinion is actually backed up with some good data, but also recognizing there are few absolutes because depending on the scenario.
So here he's talking about when you're an expert and you're informing the jury, it should be backed up by good data. And that's what scientists do. They compile data. But Riley Nolan doesn't have data to back up her opinion, but Becca Barlow does. Becca Barlow has cited it all throughout the motions that she's filed. Riley Nolan has not. Riley Nolan does not have data to stand on. That's the big difference between what's going on here in the Brian Koberger case. And it does have the scientific community kind of concerned, worried, nervous. It's really awful. And of course, that doesn't translate to the courts for some reason. I don't know why. Hopefully Hitler's a little smarter when it comes to this DNA stuff. But here we go. He's talking about backing up your opinion with lots of data.
And we know that many of these are highly variable. So, but it still can be guided with good data. And sometimes it's okay to say, well, I don't know for sure, but here's what I think is more likely than something else.
Absolutely. Well, along those lines, Ashley, maybe you can talk about the variability and DNA content from person to person. And I know, we were talking, I think you're talking in your presentation about a domesticated fingerprint and domesticated hand methods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that is one of the biggest problems when you're dealing with touch and trace level DNA is that it is very it's variable between people and within people. So it's affected by a number of factors like when you washed your hands last, the temperature, the environment, what you've touched. So even the same person can deposit different amounts of DNA during the day. So the issue from a research standpoint is we don't know how much DNA was deposited. So it makes it difficult to do any quantitative analysis of DNA transfer when you don't know what you started with. So we developed the domesticated fingerprint, which is simply a known quantity of DNA in a background of sebaceous fingerprint chemistry. And the domesticated hand is a nitrile glove with an epidermal skin equivalent or mock skin on top of it that we can use to do transfers. And what it does is take out those variabilities from the experiment so we can then focus on DNA transfer, DNA recovery, the things that we're really looking for.
That's fascinating. So these are really innovative tools. Maybe you can talk about how they were developed and how you're using them to advance what you're doing.
I can. So the domesticated fingerprint we developed first. At first, we were looking to develop a positive control for touch DNA so that you could analyze it along your touch DNA samples and know that you've gotten recovery and such. It seems so easy. We know we need a known quantity of DNA. Just put it in some fingerprint chemistry. There's some great research out there that gives us a recipe for fingerprint chemistry. So the problem became finding the DNA source. Now we know that an epithelial cell contains 6 picograms of DNA. So if we could put a known quantity of epithelial cells into our chemistry, then we know how much DNA we've put in. So we first had to find the cells to use. We thought about Palmer scraping, since those are the real cells that are involved, but we just couldn't get enough for our experiments. We looked at white blood cells, but they're these nice, round, healthy things. They do not have the morphology and behavior of the skin we would find. So finally, we landed on buccal cells. They are similar in morphology. Your buccal cells and the cells on your skin are both squamous epithelial cells. The cells on your
Hi, Preston B, and hi to Die For. Welcome. So to Die For, we are watching. It is called How Did the DNA Get There? And it's from ISHE. And this ISHE is another one of those organizations where they meet, I don't know, annually, and they forensic scientists from all over, they come and they give presentations on the things that they are working on. And the cool thing is they give these little like interviews before, you know, they go and give a presentation. So this is great. These are all forensic scientists who are in the field. ISHE. Yeah, it's like the international, I forgot what it was something forensic science. I just read it. All right. And it's so good because they're going to talk about Brian Kohlberger and like how uncomfortable they are with Riley Nolan's opinion. And that's amazing that like they're bringing up a current case. Like normally I think that forensic scientists are conservative and they may not want to present an opinion publicly, but a lot of them are actually speaking out. And that just whatever they're talking about, you know, it's just surprising they're talking at all publicly. So here we go. Yeah, it's so cool. I love it to die for.
Skin are keratinized, which means that they become filled with a protein called keratin. It serves as a barrier between the outside and inside. Your buccal cells are the same type of cells, but they don't contain protein and they have their nucleus, which is where the DNA is. So now we have our cell. Now we just have to count them. No big deal, right? Okay, they like each other. They like to stick together. And
thank you to Die For. And I don't know how long you're going to stay with us, but until you stay, I hope you have a good night. And yeah, you can be on Replay Crew tomorrow, I guess. All right, I'm going to put this on.
you can't count cells if they're clumped. And we have to be able to count the number of cells singly to put them into our fingerprint. So there was a little bit of hair pulling. There was a little bit of work. Ultimately, what came out is there's this reagent called Acumax. It's used in cell culture. It's cell dissociation medium. We couldn't use it as a manufacturer recommended because what we're doing is kind of weird. So we developed a protocol and we unclump the cells. So now we can count the cells. We do a buccal scraping. We float the cells off in Acumax. We have a procedure to do, count the cells, and now we've got calculated cells per microliter. Now we know how much we're adding to our mock fingerprint. Add it to the fingerprint chemistry, bring it up to 20 microliters in PBS, and then we can start to deposit it. So now we've got a mock fingerprint, our domesticated fingerprint, right? The cousin of the wild fingerprint that's deposited naturally in the wild. So we can now do things like see how much of it stays on the surface, calculate recovery on different surfaces. But now, as we're thinking of moving into activity level, we have to start doing activities, and pipetting onto a surface isn't a real activity. So that's where the domesticated hand was born, because there has to be human contact in a transfer pathway. And I can tell you this one, I swear I lost hair over this one. This one came to me during the pandemic. I was at home. I was in Chicago, so we were locked down. So I was working from home and I was sitting at my table And I was writing madly all these schemes for how I'm going to transfer a mock fingerprint on a hand, right? But if I do it on a real hand, that person contributes their DNA. So I can't do that, but I want the motion of a handshake. I want the warmth of a hand. I want the friction. I want the pressure. And sometimes I come up with really crazy ideas because I'm a researcher and I get to, and it just popped in my head, what if I made mock skin? And I said, oh, well, has anybody done this? And I went to the literature and I found that, yes, somebody stole my idea 20 years ago. So as they often do.
I hate when that happens. It's the worst, right?
It was a wonderful idea and you find out somebody already did it. But it just tells you you're on the right path. So there are so many formulations for mock skin for doing different things. So epidermal skin equivalent, I just call it mock skin because it's easier. So we picked 3 to test. 2 of them.
Oh, good night to IDAHO4. So good to see you. Oh, sweet dreams. Oh, you had a lovely time. You're so sweet. Awesome.
Were formulations that we made in the lab, and then one of them is called Orca Leather. We buy it from a company in Germany. We fashioned it onto a nitrile glove. The best way to get it on is Gorilla Glue. And so we put the skin on the hand. We can now put the mock fingerprint onto the skin and transfer it, or we can put it on a surface and transfer it that way. And in this manner, we can run the pathways and we can start with a known quantity of DNA. We can watch how it transfers across a pathway under different conditions. We can compare different variables along the way, like how many surfaces are involved, and we can quantify the whole thing. So we have an actual number to apply, and we run enough replicates that we get that we have significance. We can run statistics on it and convince ourselves that we're getting the right answer.
That is a fascinating process that you went through. And I love how you bring in things that make it easy for anybody to understand. And the fact that you're using Gorilla Glue, that's hysterical. I mean, that's really adds just a nice little touch to it too. So yeah, you made good use of your pandemic time, I would say.
Oh, but then I told you I get to do crazy things because I'm in research, right? And sometimes I go down a pathway where it has absolutely no relevance to an operational lab, right? And that's when I call Ray. He's the voice of reason, and he's the person who has the experience, and he can actually see immediately when things are going to translate well. So that's why this partnership is so important.
Well, you're leading right into my next question, because you are working on the proof of concept. You know, how is this going to translate in the real world? And you spoke about a case, Idaho versus Kohlberger. Yeah, I want to say that correctly for you.
There it is, guys. She's going to directly ask him about the Kohlberger case. Oh, this is so good. Like, she's asking, like, forensic scientists, what are you going to think of? What do you think of this case? Oh my gosh. Incredible. Let's listen.
Let's talk about that.
So certainly it's always innocent until proven guilty. So that's before the courts right now. But we can look at it. The whole goal is, especially for forensic science research, you want something that has practical application. So certainly the philosophy of science, you've heard fantastic how we got to taking the variables out and starting with a known amount of DNA on something that is highly variable. But it has to have an application to real world cases. And so the excitement for me is, well, these are just different substrates. And so when you have a different substrate, and so we were thinking subway poles, how might DNA get there by some other means? And then here comes a case where the very important item is a snap on a knife sheath. So it's an area of focused contact. Very, very likely whoever, and that's common sense, whoever is using that knife had to unsnap the sheath. And so whoever's DNA is on there, particularly because it was found under one of the bodies on top of the bed, but still under a body, clearly kind of a smoking gun kind of item, but now you have a substrate. Now the fact that you worked and created all of this foundation it's really just inserting a different kind of object, a different kind of substrate. So now you have that real world application that makes this really not only a lot of fun, but it makes it, you're really going to be able to apply it to some exact case examples.
That's remarkable. I mean, maybe we can even delve into that a little bit more. We were going to talk about, withstanding scrutiny in a courtroom. So maybe you can talk about cases that have already happened or where you foresee this being used and how you will be able to withstand that criticism when if you've got the right science.
I can't even believe it. I can't even handle it. She's just going right for it. Like, how is this going to stand up in court? Like, what? Like, they're talking about this at a forensic science convention? Oh, hello, young Black economist. Welcome. Good to see you. All right. So she asked a great question. Oh, thank you. I love Miss Potts. Oh, thank you for coming over from Miss Potts, and that's great. Send her my love if you ever see her. Yes, this interview is amazing. This interviewer just was like, how is the state's DNA evidence going to hold up in court? And look at the first guy. I forget what his name is. He is so stiff and he's kind of like look at his body language. He like doesn't really want to answer it. All right, here we go. This is so good. So
Behind what you're doing.
Right. So certainly one of the big foremost things is transparency. Here's how the things were done. Here was the scientific rigor so that anyone else can look at what you've done and they can repeat the experiments. And to me, that's the beauty of science, is that transparency and transportability, and something that when they see what you've done and they can see that you have also enough replicates, and there's still going to be some variation, but when you can see the same kind of results reoccurring on an experiment.
like the first thing he said is that you can replicate the experiment. First thing out the gate, the state doesn't have that. They can't reproduce anything because they consume the whole sample. So from a scientific point of view, the first thing that you need to make sure your work is correct, you don't have it. You don't have the data. It's ridiculous. They don't have anything on that. Okay. And young Black economists, you're right. It's scary because the juries, they do hear DNA and they're like guilty. We are so far behind in our DNA knowledge. None of us here, none of us on replay because we're all learning together here. But like people who aren't learning about DNA, they just don't know anymore because things changed with DNA. All right, so they can't replicate what she did in the lab.
Is designed well, but also is something where you can transport it and go, well, here's one where you had snap, or here you have a subway pole where somebody is saying, instead of going directly to the knife, I happened to handle a subway pole, and then someone else, the real killer, came and touched that same spot, and then they took my DNA to the scene. You can reasonably replicate it. So it's really going to add information that's objective, that anyone can criticize it, or they can look at it and go, that was really done well. And you can now use that to help inform what actually did happen, because none of us were at the crime scene other than perhaps that one person who was suspected or committed it. But we really have to provide something that's really going to inform it with a real world kind of example and applicability.
Well, and along those lines, I'm sure there is anything new. There's controversy, there's ethical considerations. Was this primary? Was this tertiary? I mean, not just in implicating someone in the crime, but exonerating them as well.
I didn't catch that the first time. We're going to go back. Oh my God. This is so good. What is this? Her third question? And she's like, the third question is about the ethics. Ethics. Oh my God. She's just going to go right and just like ask these forensic scientists, like, what are the ethics of primary and secondary transfer DNA? What what that Riley Nolan is gonna do is so wrong. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay, so let's hear about the ethics. Oh dear.
Well, along those lines, I'm sure there is anything new. There's controversy, there's ethical considerations. Was this primary? Was this tertiary? I mean, not just in implicating someone in the crime, but exonerating them as well. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that controversy and what you see
Okay,
is going to happen.
That's a wonderful point. I mean, when you consider, again, as forensic scientists, you're neither for the prosecution or for the defense. You're just for providing best information to the finder of fact. And typically that's the jury. So they're the ones that have to take all that complex information, apply it to this crime scene, and then they're making the decision. So our duty is to give them the best information. But that includes having an opinion, but that opinion can also be even a better opinion based on data. So if you can provide some data so they can say, well, it looks like in this case, direct transfer is a better explanation, but I also have rigorous.
Wow, we have a shout out. Outcast, welcome. Great work on your audio. Excellent. Thank you. Oh, I just wanted to mention young black economist. You're probably right. I'm not really sure. I was so excited about the other stuff. I missed how he used the word replicate. All right, let's go back.
Studies that helped me base that opinion. And here's why I think that is. And here's a secondary transfer scenario that's very realistic in this situation. So you really have to take this into consideration. So we really have a duty to justice, to both sides. We have to be neutral, but how do you stay neutral? Here's my opinion and why, and it's based on this data that anyone else can replicate, and we're sharing that data.
Well, yeah, you're exactly touching on where I was going to go next. I mean, how do you balance those ethical considerations with the scientific data? You touched on a lot of points, but I'd love to actually hear maybe from both of you how, what you think this is going to look like potentially going forward. I mean, we're guessing a bit, but that's okay. This is just the start.
Transparency is so important. So we will, of course, make all of the data, all of the raw data readily available. We are developing our bullpen of events. This is our repository for all of our information. We put in there our...
So she's going to go into what types of experiments that they're doing so that they can create that empirical data to back up how to explain to a jury the how and the when. So the only place in the world that I know that says they have a proven way, and there's one lab in Australia. I don't know what their methodologies are. I don't know if this group here looked at their methodologies, but here, I guess in the United States or wherever they are working on the methodologies to be able to answer those proposition questions, which is the how and the when of the DNA. And this is fascinating because not only is she going to go through what you should go through, regularly when you're testing DNA, which it didn't happen in the Brian Koberger case because you can't replicate it. So you don't know if Riley Nolan or whoever is at the lab did this. And what she's saying here is excellent. And the way that she was going to tag them, she calls it a bullpen, and you put like different labels on them so that somebody else coming through, they can see exactly what you pulled. So I'll go back a little bit so we can hear that again. But this is like a twofer. She'll go into kind of what she thinks, what the standards and operating procedures should be. All right. So, young black economist says, if that's what he's saying, then I understand. If we have some data points, like this person working at Chipotle or worked at police office, that can add to the analysis but using replicate weird. Yeah, I think you're right. All right, I'm going to go back a little bit. I'm sorry, I got so excited about the other parts, I completely missed that, young Black economist.
Neutral. Here's my opinion and why, and it's based on this data that anyone else can replicate, and we're sharing that data.
Well, yeah, you're exactly touching on where I was going to go next. I mean, how do you balance those ethical considerations with the scientific data? You touched on a lot of points, but I'd love to actually hear maybe from both of you how, what you think this is going to look like potentially going forward. I mean, we're guessing a bit, but that's okay. This is just the start.
Transparency is so important. So we will, of course, make all of the data, all of the raw data readily available. We are developing our bullpen of events. This is our repository for all of our information. We put in there our recovery and loss data for a particular surface. We've got recovery and loss defined as an independent events. So the idea is we have a repository that has it'll have the knife sheath collected by a cotton swab, extracted with DNA IQ. And we have the numbers for each of those. So you can go into the bullpen and pick your scenario and string it together. And ideally, we hope to grow it large enough that we have information about many, many different scenarios that's going to be immediately useful. But this is readily available to the public. It's not secret. The data is freely available. We plan to publish. This research was funded by an NIJ grant. Our final reports will be made public, and it will contain all of the data. And we also will deposit our data in a repository.
So just to add to what Ashley is saying, so we're also designing experiments that really have the best scenario for the maximum amount of secondary or for transfer. So for example, I'll use one of the examples is a subway car poll where somebody.
Hey, welcome, Mads. Good to see you. Thanks for coming by. This is, let me just give you a overview here. They are at an event where forensic scientists go and they put on presentations. And I guess they all learn from each other. And they're talking about new standards and procedures that they want to create so that they can answer these how and when questions the DNA. Because currently the United States does not have any training on it. They don't have any information on it. They don't have any data. So how in the world Riley Nolan is going to get up there and say what she's going to say? Nobody knows. So they are, I don't know. I think she has annual presentations. I don't know. Oh, this one is coming up. So the International Symposium on Human Identification. Their next big thing is in Palm Beach, Florida, November 3rd to the 6th, 2025. And these are all about, forensic scientists identifying. It's all about the how and the when. Let's see, young Black economist says, can't they put what DNA was into the system? Isn't that what CODA says? I think they can, but it's just what will be the output? What will be the return on it? Sometimes they don't get a return because not everybody's in there. Great question.
Scenario for the maximum.
We plan to publish. This research was funded by an NIJ grant. Our final reports will be made public, and it will contain all of the data. And we also will deposit our data in a repository.
So just to add to what Ashley is saying, so we're also designing experiments that really have the best scenario for the maximum amount of secondary or for transfer. So for example, I'll use one of the examples is a subway car pole where somebody would put their hand. Now, we're cleaning that off so you can put on the DNA, in a scientific manner. I would venture to guess that subway pole has not been clean except for one point in its lifetime, which when it was brand new. So there's probably an incredible mixture of DNA that you could never figure out in reality. So, but that's part of you're giving under the best work case examples that you can possibly set up, or experimental examples. Here's a clean subway pole. Here is now a deposit that's going on to that, and now somebody coming along right afterwards touching exactly the same spot and then transferring it to the knife handle, another event, and what transfers there. In reality, when you think about how many things that would have to happen, really, a clean subway pole, is that going to happen? And so somebody would have to touch exactly that same spot, and then they would commit the murder, and then here's what the data would show. So if you buy those premises, but here's the data, that, my goodness, that is possible, or for that matter, it's far less likely than just that person directly touched the knife. But to be able to set up those experiments and have, as Ashley had referred, the bullpen of events, and it's just like mock fingerprints, we have a lot of fun. And Ashley is extremely creative at coming up with these names. But the idea that you can take different scenarios and you can have data to go, oh no, it wasn't a pole, it was a snap. No, it wasn't a snap, it was a different substrate. To be able to put together just different independent events so they can be put together, and the data in each one, and you can essentially come up with a formula to go, under your circumstance, here's what we would expect to see. And that would inform the opinion to be able to just, again, give good data to the people who have to make the decision, the jury, so they can make the best decision for each case.
I mean,
That's correct. Young Black economist asks, they can't do this yet. Not yet. We are right at the beginning. Everybody on here and on Replay Crew and everybody who follows this channel, we are ahead of what the DNA community and the paradigm shift in DNA and how that will affect the court system. And forensic scientists are now developing the procedures, the policies, procedures, and once they do that and they compile data, then they can start training other people, but we don't have that yet. So how in the world is Riley Nolan going to talk about it when the United States does not have this yet? Oh, you have great comments here, Young Black Economist. Young Black Economist says, probably wouldn't be able to find a formula, would need to analyze each situation, which requires someone very skilled. Right, that's a great point. Oh my gosh, that likelihood ratio, oh, I do not like that thing. Okay, so it's a Young Black Economist says the likelihood ratio, it's a very old method in statistics. You can't publish using MLE anymore because it's so basic. It's like 1983 methodology, biology. They can't have that. They suck at math. They do suck at math. So that likelihood ratio, for me, I feel like it's one of like a personal exercise that like a forensic scientist will do when they are going to start on a case. And that's one of the biggest reasons why you can separate a sample and give it to 4 or 5 different analysts in the same lab, and they will come out with 4 or 5 different answers because of their personal experiment, the likelihood ratio. I don't think it makes sense at all. I don't think we should be allowed to use it. It's not scientific. Anyway, let's watch this again here. Let's see. I'll go back a little bit so that we can. This is so good. I'm just gonna have to like. I'll put the link in the description so you guys can watch it. Oh, look, we're almost finished here. All right, here we go.
up with a formula to go, under your circumstance, here's what we would expect to see. And that would inform the opinion to be able to just, again, give good data to the people who have to make the decision, the jury, so they can make the best decision for each case.
I mean, I think it's fascinating. And I love the way that you have used terms that make it easy, domesticated versus wild, the bullpen. So it just the transparency of the database and the data so people can begin to understand this with any newer technology or where things are being worked through. So that's an amazing way to push it forward.
Well, it's interesting that you'd say like newer technology, and the remarkable developments to me is like a miracle in a tube, what can be done with DNA, and so sensitive. But ironically, the same philosophies of trace evidence still apply from hair and fiber days, but instead of fiber floating or being transferred with contact, now it's DNA, which is much more discriminating, but there's still, how did it get there? And at the end of the day, we're about what is the truth and what actually occurred. And there's absolutely situations where I was there innocently, there's a reason for my DNA to be there, and that information should be as accurately portrayed as possible.
He brings up a good point here. When you can have DNA results from a crime scene, you have the criminal activity and you have the alternate activity. The alternate activity would be, yes, my DNA was found at a crime scene, but it was innocently there because of this and this and this. Or my DNA was innocently there and I don't know why. Those are the propositions that we keep talking about, and that goes right into the how and the when. So for these people who do have a DNA result at a crime scene, but they're not connected to the criminal activity, you are going to ask these questions, and you're going to weigh how relevant is this actual trace transfer sample, because now we're realizing there can be DNA results at a crime scene, but they are not involved in the criminal activity. And that's just like revolutionary. Like that is completely different from anything we've ever been taught. It will sweep through the courts. It will hopefully become common sense one day. It's going to be a little difficult, to explain to people who don't really understand or don't want to understand that, yeah, your DNA can be at a crime scene and you were never there. Science, science is weird.
I was there innocently. But ironically, the same philosophies of trace evidence still apply from hair and fiber days, but instead of fiber floating or being transferred with contact, now it's DNA, which is much more discriminating, but there's still, how did it get there? And at the end of the day, we're about what is the truth and what actually occurred. And there's absolutely situations where I was there innocently, there's a reason for my DNA to be there, and that information should be as accurately portrayed as possible so the finder of fact, the jury, can come up with the right decision. And we know secondary transfer occurs. We know that there are parameters, and there are situations where it very well likely could be the case as well.
It's so interesting. Have you been getting a lot of questions from people after, talking about this with the community here at IDAHO4?
Yeah, and here we've mostly gotten, I've mostly gotten a good reception. People seem to be very interested in the bullpen and the capability of stringing together a crime scene, giving actual information about what's happened.
Yeah, I agree. And it's such a great group because they're absolutely about getting the right answer. And what I found, really emotional, is hearing stories of people who were exonerated because data came to light, evidence, hard evidence that they could not have committed the crime. And the applause and the cheering, the emotion you got was the same or even heightened than when a cold case was solved. People, forensic scientists, are about getting the right answer, and that absolutely includes exonerations. But better data helps us provide the finder of fact with better information because they got a tough job.
Oh, welcome, Deborah Harris, of course. anytime you want to send your questions. I also have an email that should be in my description. And anytime you want to leave a comment, great. Well, hopefully we will see you on the replay crew, and thank you for coming by.
But the better we can be at it just means we all want to get the right answer. The last thing we want to do is have the wrong person held responsible for a crime that they did not commit. You want the right person, but they're going to do a better job with better data. And that's our aim, is to provide that, just to make it clear and help inform our forensic scientists that they can have.
Let's listen to that one more time, because the way that they got to this answer is they were asking about Brian Kohberger's case. This is part of the answer that they're providing. And these are from forensic scientists who will be some of the ones that are compiling the data to answer these proposition questions of how and when the DNA got there. And it's very interesting to me that they are talking about how DNA can be innocently at a crime scene. It's like part of their answer. This is so crazy. Let me go back a little bit so we can hear this again. Back.
We all want to get the right answer. The last thing we want to do is have the wrong person held responsible for a crime that they did not commit. You want the right person, but they're going to do a better job with better data. And that's our aim, is to provide that, just to make it clear and help inform our forensic scientists that they can have well-informed opinions to, again, help the finder of fact.
Well, what fascinating research, and what a fascinating way to push this forward. I mean, if we think back even a decade, it's unbelievable where we've come, and it looks like we're just pushing forward yet again. So before we let you go, first of all, is there anything we've missed that you really want to be sure we include in the video?
Well, I don't think, in talking about the research, we've developed this domesticated fingerprint. During development, we also run wild fingerprints, so we can watch how they compare to each other to make sure that the domesticated fingerprint is a good control. And we have found it is, like Ray said, it is the best possible scenario.
So she brought up here a wild fingerprint, which is very, very important that she brought that up, because that also goes to like wild DNA samples, which are found in the natural environment, versus lab conditions, which are very controlled, and they do a lot of work to try to mirror, you know, what's out there in real life is messy, lots of germs, and so it's kind of hard to get a sterile kind of environment to mimic what's actually out there. So what she's talking about here is that she was able to create something that is very close to what would be in the wild, like a wild fingerprint that you would just get anywhere. Which is very impressive, because that's extremely hard to do when you start in like medical conditions in the labs, because you got to start from a clean slate, so you know where all the micro, all the bacteria, all the DNA, where it all came from. So you start from ground zero. And so that's another reason why it's a little odd that the state is claiming that their DNA stuff has fell into place so perfectly. It's like they did Olympic events all the way through. The most like underdog, the most unlikely thing happened every time, every step of the way, with the DNA from the Brian Kohberger case. All right, let's go back a little bit so we can hear her talk about these wild fingerprints.
Domesticated fingerprint. During development,
Research, and what a fascinating way to push this forward. I mean, if we think back even a decade, it's unbelievable where we've come, and it looks like we're just pushing forward yet again. So before we let you go, first of all, is there anything we've missed that you really want to be sure we include in the video?
well, I don't think, in talking about the research, we've developed this domesticated fingerprint. during development, we also run wild fingerprints so we can watch how they compare to each other to make sure that the domesticated fingerprint is a good control. And we have found it is, like Ray said, it is the best possible scenario. And when we're talking about subway polls, we have an actual New York City subway poll. So it's the real thing. It is clean, cleaner than it's ever been before.
How did you get it that way? Just curious now.
Well, it's DNA soy, it's ethanol and sterile water. That's one of the things my students have to troubleshoot for each surface is how we decon it. So before we do every experiment, we take a background swab. So we're absolutely sure that the surface is clean because we're dealing with such low levels of DNA. We have to know there's no prior contribution for these experiments.
Yeah. So what I'd love to add is I really have treasured the partnership. And so part of it is Ashley is outstanding to work with, and it's a lot of fun. And so we really enjoy it. Not just the brainstorming and working together, but coming up with something that's real world applicability. The other piece of it, which I think is outstanding, is the students really embrace something that they've got to work on something in order to get their master's or whichever degree they're working on. But to be able to do something that has real world applicability, but it also really helps in terms of their training, their critical thinking, their thought process. And then for them to then get a job and be able to apply that almost immediately in their training and then them becoming an even better forensic scientist. I think it's a wonderful partnership to have better students, certainly more meaningful research, and then sort of selfishly for us in the crime lab, better data that we can have better forensic scientists, better representing and doing what we're doing, going out to the courts, educating and having better informed opinions. I think it's a wonderful partnership and just
Oh my God.
not only is
We gotta go back. So he's talking about developing training, developing procedures, graduating the current students out so that they can apply these new skills once they learn it. And then he goes, so that we can have better forensic experts. That might not be a direct dig at Riley Nolan, but she should, she's either purposely turning a blind eye, or right now at this moment, everybody here in chat, everybody on replay crew, anybody who watches any of my videos, and there's other great DNA videos out there, I love seeing those. It appears we know more than Riley Nolan does at this moment. Or she's purposely being biased, which is unethical. And some people have, we heard the word ethical in this interview. I've seen on LinkedIn from other forensic scientists talk about ethics and Riley Nolan in the same post. So awesome. All right, let's go.
representing and doing what we're doing, going out to the courts, educating and having better informed opinions. I think it's a wonderful partnership, and just not only is more fun, but we all benefit a lot from having that collaborative effort.
And we really appreciate you doing these videos because it goes out to a larger audience, not just people that are interested in coming potentially to ISHE, but anybody who is interested in forensic science and wants to watch this. And I really appreciate you making it understandable and sharing the new knowledge and, yeah, training the next generation, and not just in new technologies, but like you said, in a way to reason through what they're doing. That's fabulous. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for having us. It's wonderful to be able to share this out.
It is. Really appreciate that you're here. Now, Ray, I know you've been with us many times. Ashley, I'm always in the studio, so I never know if people have visited multiple times. This is the first time. How about for you?
At ISHE?
Yeah.
I've been here a number of times before.
Okay.
This is my first time speaking at ISHE.
Okay.
I've had posters, but I've never been on the stage before.
Okay, well, since you've both been here and it's our 35th anniversary, we'd love to ask, what have your experiences been like and what brings you back?
Well, I like it because of the community. The DNA community is here. I like the talks. The talks are very high level. And in the past few issues, they've been starting with keynote speakers that are real world. And I really enjoy that. It helps me remember why we do what we do.
That's wonderful. I really appreciate hearing that. Yeah. How about you, Ray?
Yes. So for me, getting together with the community, and we kind of think of like, what's our mission in the crime lab and forensic science? We don't come up with the technology, but we go out, we get together, we sort of shop the world for the best technology and bring it home to our jurisdiction and apply it to our cases. And getting together and seeing and hearing of the successes, as well as the learning experiences from other crime labs, not only is it fun, but we get to hear what they're doing and then take that learning and those relationships and bring them back. It just makes our cases better. And at the same time, it's extremely rejuvenating. We all need to get our batteries charged, as Ashley said, keeping us grounded and know why we do what we do, hearing from real world people that, victims, families, exonerated people that is really impacted. And frankly, hearing these stories is like, I get the same emotion hearing them virtually. It's like it's for the first time, even though we come multiple years, but it's really why we come back.
Well, thank you both for sharing that. And thank you so much for taking time out with us. We really, really appreciate you being here, not just to share your experience with the panel, but also taking time with the video. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Oh my God, that was such a good interview. And like, they talk about like ethics and people being innocent and the wrong people going, like, and Brian Kohlberger all in the same interview. Like, if these things weren't fundamental principles that Brian Kohlberger's DNA is most likely innocently there, they wouldn't be having those conversations in the same conversation as Brian Kohlberger's name. So it's very interesting how they were able to answer those questions, and they did it in a very nice way. And Young Black Economist has an excellent question here. So Riley Nolan is the DNA expert that will talk about secondary transfer or transfer DNA at the trial for the state. She is the director of the Idaho State Lab in Meridian, Idaho. So she runs an entire lab. So if she's not understanding, these new fundamental principles, or she's purposely ignoring them and being biased, she's like the head of a hospital. She's running that whole lab. So they're all going to be kind of biased and probably unethical. Like, I don't know. So we're going to have these new fundamental principles, and they're going to, veer away from the CSI show, because real forensics doesn't work like that. Oh, geez. Yes. So Riley Nolan inspired me to do my series on criminals, forensic science. All the signs are there. They probably didn't do anything nefarious, but something is not right. And it's amazing that the scientific community is actually speaking, like, publicly. No matter what they say, but they're speaking about the case. That's absolutely insane. Because usually they want to be like conservative and they don't want to get involved. They don't want to go on each side. But it's like they all feel kind of like, I need to say something, or because it's not right. I have another video for us. It's a lot shorter. I have played it before, but that was when I had like really weird internet. So it was like not very smooth. But this is a great follow-up to this one. It's one of the best ones ever. Oh, not this one. Where is it? Yeah, it's called Shocking Truths About DNA Testing. And this guy is, I'll just let you hear him. You'll know right away.
DNA transfer is a big issue just now, because it used to be when DNA started, we had identifiable body fluids. The technique wasn't very sensitive, so it was blood, semen, saliva, that type of thing. So you could see what you were testing. Now we've got weapons, drug bags, things like that, where we're just swabbing. It's trace evidence that's invisible. Some people call it touch DNA, and that's a misnomer, because you don't need to touch something.
Yeah.
You know, as I'm speaking just now, my DNA is going all over this table, so I hate to worry you. But, and, you know, so you took this glass and you put it there, right? And I touched that glass. I could pick your DNA up from that glass.
And then if you were to touch something else, you could spread my DNA.
Yes. So that's
Right.
well. Remember that so going back to these swabs.
Yeah.
So you now do a swab, and you find 4 people's DNA on there. Now, you can't say who touched it, if they touched it at all. You can't say what order the DNA was deposited in. It could have been any one of them that deposited the other 3. So that's the consequence of increasing the sensitivity of the DNA. I mean, DNA doesn't go about on its own, right? It's in cells, skin cells, and so on. So you get about, let's say, between 5 and 10,000 cells on the head of a pin. We can produce a profile from about 10 of those.
Does it get to a point where it's too sensitive?
In my view, yes.
Because
I mean,
it blurs the lines, right?
Sorry?
It blurs the lines.
Well, of course, because now when you've got the blood, semen, saliva, there's a connection with a fluid, which is normally a connection then to the crime. But there may be no connection to the crime with the techniques we're currently using.
So it's leading you down a path that is probably, or not probably, but maybe incorrect.
Well, as well as that, once you get to that level, you're also talking about mostly mixtures of DNA. For the reasons I've just said, you touch something, I touch something, now we've mixed our DNA, we move on to something else. You know, I remember when I was the head of the police lab in 1990 something, right? And I warned about this, that this increasing sensitivity would lead to miscarriages of justice. And so what's happening is that the public remember new DNA, like when it came in, it was, you know, the magic bullet. Oh, we've got his DNA, therefore it must be him that's the criminal, right? But now, as I've explained, the DNA, your DNA gets places you've never been. That's now become a bit of a phrase everywhere, but I'm patenting it. Your DNA gets places you've never been. Because the example I gave is I shake your hand, go into my car, I've put your DNA in my car, you've never been there. So that creates a real problem. And so from the lawyer's point of view, for the prosecution, what they've got to do now is make a consistent story, not just from the DNA, which is why we went through a phase of some saying, oh, we'd never prosecute on DNA alone. Well, I've kind of seen them prosecuting on DNA alone. So, and that's dangerous. And when we come to mixtures, that introduces a whole new level of complexity. Because I mentioned, you know, our DNA on the glass. So let's say your DNA, well, it's just labels I'm using here. Your DNA is AB and mine's CD.
Okay.
So when we make a swab of that glass and look at it in the lab, we see ABCD. So yeah, you could be a contributor to that mixture, and so could I, right? But what about somebody else who has the genotype BC? If they're a suspect, they could also have contributed to that DNA, even though they actually didn't.
So is the DNA not specific to the person? Is it more like a...
Well, yes and no. But remember, we're mixing people's DNA, and so you produce new profiles. And the example I've just given there, when we mix, excuse me, A, B, C, D, you can now get who could be a contributor. A, B, C, D, AC, BD, and BC. So from that simple mixture, you've now produced 6 suspect profiles.
Yeah.
Now that's just in one area and with a 2-person mixture, right? So imagine now, it's not just one area, it's not just the ABCD area, it's the other 16 or 20 odd. Once you do that, if you imagine you've created 6 possible genotypes at that one area,
Yeah.
it would be 6 to the 16th or 20th. You
Jesus
go into
Christ.
the billions and trillions of false positives. In other words, profiles that could be considered
Mhm.
as contributors, but they're not actual contributors. So you produce more false positives than you produce actual correct results.
And would the police kind of put, so they've got the DNA evidence, and then they would match that with who is the suspects?
Well, in fact, that's now what's happening, because let's say that there's software that they're using now, called probabilistic genotyping software,
Mhm.
and it uses statistics. And what it does is it looks at the profiles and it generates all the possible profiles the software thinks could be there.
Yeah.
And it gives each of them a weight, right? So it might say AB's number 1.
Yeah.
Right. But since BC is also a possible genotype, it will also give that a positive weight. In other words, if somebody's BC, it will produce a high number for them as well, even though they're not contributors. So the software produces a big list of these genotypes. And what I do is,
In his example, BC isn't even present here. That is horrifying. So they're coming up with profiles of people who weren't even in the area you're looking. Oh, so scary.
just go through it and see where the suspect is. And I've got one just now where he's about 14th on the list.
Jesus. So you
Right.
need to work your way down every single, well,
Yeah,
lot
so
of
it's a lot of work, but it's harder work if he goes to jail and he shouldn't be.
yeah. Yeah.
So my role is to point out the limits of the evidence, rather than follow the leader.
Is there a difficulty when it comes to the cooperation of the police department in terms of giving you everything?
Oh
Is that-
yes, in
have I-
Scotland,
Hit a nerve.
you've hit a nerve on there. Scotland has the most restrictive disclosure regime in the world.
Right.
Okay, I do work in America. In fact, just now I think I've probably got more cases in New York than anywhere else. Florida, Australia, New Zealand, and England and Wales, obviously, Ireland.
Yeah.
So on another live, I was talking about how these forensic scientists from all over the world are coming here to the U.S. to help us write policy, to get us trained, to help us understand this trace transfer DNA better. Apparently, he's one of them. That's awesome. So he's working in New York too.
And the tradition and the correct tradition, the right way to do things, is that the lab should turn over their case files, because that logs everything that they've done, the tests they've done, the results they've done, and allows us to examine it.
Yeah.
In Scotland, they don't do that.
Right.
And we've had it's on our website, we've had correspondence with the Justice Minister, and everybody's just Teflon shoulders. Oh, it's nothing to do with us.
Right.
And it's the problem. Well, there's 2 problems. One, the Scottish Police Authority. They're the proximal problem, if you like. I mean, it's them that are saying, no, you're not getting this. But I think beyond that is the Justice Minister, who just needs to say to the Scottish Police Authority, just give them the results like every other country in the world, right? So, but nobody's listening. And when the lawyers, that's, well, maybe not for this case, because they don't want to challenge it. So it's very disappointing. I mean, the Herald did an editorial on this in 2011. That's how long it's been going on. We cannot properly analyse the evidence by simply visiting Gartcosh. The Gartcosh is where the police lab, the main police lab is. Now, you have to remember here that we're paid by legal aid.
Yeah.
So the Scottish government are paying the taxpayer, are paying for the Scottish Police Authority to examine this evidence that's going to determine whether somebody goes to jail or not, right? So they've paid for that work. But now when we ask to see it on behalf of the defendant, they say, no, you've got to come to us. So we can't copy it even when we're there. And this only came about when Police Scotland came about, incidentally. It used to be the individual police forces were okay. So, but now I can't, and my colleagues can't discuss it because we can't see it. We can't put it in front of us and discuss it, right? So, and we're supposed to have this so-called peer review, where it's not just one scientist is looking at it, it's two scientists.
Is that to remove like bias or prejudice? Or...
Yeah, well, it's more expertise as well.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know everything, nearly everything, but and so it's appalling and absurd that in 24, that we have the most restrictive disclosure rules for scientific evidence in the world, and yet nobody seems to care.
It's bizarre.
Yeah. What do you think of those? It's just I know that Riley Nolan said something about, you know, opinions and how there are people out there who don't agree with opining on the how and the when of the DNA. However, she's failing to understand, or she's just like not, that she's ignoring that these are fundamental principles. So I had to get that that first interview out there because it's so interesting that the interviewer, she asked some pretty direct questions about Brian Kohberger's case, and they gave great answers. So if you need to, you can go back and rewatch that. I will put the link in the description, so if you want to watch it all the way through. Yeah. So thank you everybody for coming to visit on a live. Thank you everybody here. Thank you everybody on replay crew. So you have a great weekend. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.